is our best speaker program we've had in 4 years. We have some awesome people to speak. So let's introduce Chris Beatty, a member of our board of directors. Frank Gasson, who many of you know is our founder. Frank started this whole project. He is a senior vice president. Bob Dwyer, over here with his t-shirt on, he's our vice president and our resident doctor of oceanography. Who am I missing? Martha, where's Martha?
Yep.
Martha's right here, Martha Hofer. So unfortunately, one of our directors' son decided to get married today. So we're missing Patty Danilecki and our secretary, Deanna Carduz, who is Patty's best friend. And then Bill Vino is at his annual family reunion in the Carolinas. So that's the people on the board. You know, we certainly want to thank everybody for coming today, and we want to thank so much support. Everyone who's paying their dues and donating. We're very financially sound. We're able to spend our money on oysters and still have some left over. So I just want to introduce a few other people. So we have our own resident, like 100 yards from here, select board member, Gene Azarovitz, Gene was at the very first meeting we had here in August of 2019. There were about 30 of us, and now she's elevated to being cool. Okay, so I want to thank Sue Barlow, who is right here with the video. She's our annual guest who helps us out with Born TV. So we'll have a video for this whole process up in maybe a week or so. Is that right, Sue? Yep. We'll be on YouTube. Mike Karen, who's over here, way over on the right with his dog. Mike is our computer guy and puts up a lot of my silly questions. Martha, we want to thank you for letting us use your building.
You're welcome.
Matt and Andrea Anderson, I don't think they're here, but they are the proprietors of Kiwi Signs, which is a Bourne business, and they live right up on Shore Road. And all of the signs that you see us putting around with little red toppers on them, Matt and Andrea have donated all of those signs. Dan Barnett, where are you, Dan? Way over in the corner. Dan Barnett is one of the best volunteers we've ever found. Dan is helping us with the rain gardens. He's helping the town with this new drainage system that you're going to hear about. And Dan is going to be talking later. Thank you to the Sertas and the Doucettes for allowing us to park people in their yards. And there's a poster in the back here with old photos, some of which go back into the 1930s or before. And those were donated by Carol Lee Packard. So if you haven't had a chance to go back there after the meeting, take a look. It's very cool. Okay, so I guess it's time to get started. So we have invested it's the biggest amount of money we've ever spent. And we spent $2,000 on oyster seeds, which oyster seeds get bought by market price. So we expected to get maybe 150,000 seeds. We got 200,000 oyster seeds. So if you've been out on Patchawisset right before the spit, in that little cove, there are black tracks and they contain oyster babies who have grown now to the 3-month level, and they can now be out of their incubator over at Monument Beach. So Chris is going to talk about this, so I won't say too much of what he was going to say.
Too late. You already ruined my...
I ruined your whole thing. Come on over. This is Chris Beatty.
All right, so the way this was going to work is, I was going to say, who here has seen the long black objects in the water? And the next question was, did you know what they were? Never mind. All right, I'm going to tell you more about it, though. So we're actually very proud of this. This is one of our, big efforts this year as far as, advancing, actually doing more than just talking about, and educating everybody, but actually starting to take some actions this year. And this is one of the ones we've done where we've teamed with the Bourne Department of Natural Resources to fund the seeding and growth. There's 200,000 seeds that are in those. Actually, I think half of them are out right now. I think the other half are yet to go. So there's only 100,000 out there so far. And the idea is that they will grow into mature oysters, and the purpose is to clean the water. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about that. It turns out that oysters, clams, and other shellfish help remove excess nitrogen by incorporating it into their shells and tissues as they grow. And they filter the pollutants by consuming them and shaping them into small packets. The excess, they actually drop into little packets which deposit at the bottom. And those aren't harmful, but they actually then promote growth of other natural plants and creatures such as eelgrass again. And so there's a whole ecosystem that starts with the planting of these, or the growth of these oysters. And the nitrogen, as you've heard from all the other things we've talked about, is the leading cause of the algae blooms and the excess, the green in the water. And it turns out that a single oyster, grown oyster, can filter 50 gallons of water in a day. So, and so we're planning on doing, this is the first year we're doing this, we're planning on doing this every year, working with the town of Bourne, so that in 5 years, imagine, we'll have planted 1 million oysters in Hen Cove waters. And you take that 1 million times 50 gallons a day times how many days a year, that's a lot of water cleaning going on. And this isn't like some experimental thing that somebody dreamed up around here. They've been doing this for a number of years down in the Chesapeake Bay and some of the estuaries down in New Jersey and down in Mobile Bay, and people are seeing the action. They're saying there's measurable effects now of this. So this is a tangible, measurable, contribution to the cleanliness of water. And it complements, some of the other things that are going on in the town and state, such as the rain gardens that you've heard about from us, which are hopefully coming soon. We can get through all the wickets. The jellyfish stormwater filtration systems, which are discussed back here on some of the boards. The introduction of the innovative alternative septic systems to reduce nitrogen seepage into the groundwater, and the elimination or reduction of fertilizer runoff by either slow growth fertilizers or not using fertilizers. So this is one piece in the puzzle, but we think it's an important piece in the puzzle. We're really happy to be able to use some of the contributions from all of you to support this program and actually start to make some measurable differences in the water here in our beautiful Hen Cove and surrounding waters behind Bassett Island. So, anybody have any questions about that? Excellent.
Good job, Chris. Good job, Chris. Thank you very much. So before we get to our next speaker, I just want to show one of my least favorite things in our area, and that is these signs. So on the table in the back is a paper that we authored with the Association to Preserve Cape Cod, and it talks about why we should never see these in our area. This is a sign that you put pesticides on your property, and the pesticide, we live on Cape Cod, which has extremely porous soil. Everything runs into the water, and consequently we have a mess. So the nitrogen is part of the problem, but the pesticides are just as big of a problem. So if you take one of our papers in the back here and read it, you'll say, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. One of the lines in that information from APCC is that we don't live in Natick or Needham or Sudbury or Southborough. We all live on the Cape. And you can't have the same lawn here as you can there. So if you're only a part-timer, please, you can make your beautiful lawn wherever you come from, but once you get over the bridge, no more signs. So our next speaker is the Chief Cook and Bottle Washer of the Environment for Barnstable County. Brian Baumgartel. He is the director at the Mass Tech Testing Center up at the base, where they test septic technology from all over the country. Last time I was up there, they had a project going from Washington State. And Brian is also the chief environmentalist for the county. So he has so much knowledge, we hate to not give him like an hour to talk, but we're not gonna. Come on up, Brian. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. If you did give me an hour, I would definitely use it. All right. So, yes, I'm Brian Baumgartel. I'm Director of the Wastewater Division at Barnstable County Department of Health and Environment. I'm going to talk about, the scope of the problem and the programs that we have at the county, but I want to start out with a series of really quick questions. So, put your hand up if you have a beloved water body in the area. It's just a place that you love to go. Come on, you're in the Pocasset Water Quality Group. Everybody should have their hand up, right? All right, keep your hands up for a second. All right, do you either own or rent or visit that water body and stay at a house nearby? Right. Is there a septic system at that house? Okay, everybody has your hand up. You're contributing to the problem, which is just about everybody here. So when we have those big scope problems, obviously this is a fraction of the town of Bourne, right? But you're representatives, and there's probably a relatively high percentage of people in Bourne who have septic systems as well. When we have those big scale problems in society, what do we do to help solve those problems? Usually we use public funding to put in some sort of infrastructure to solve that problem, right? So let's say we had a body of water. Let's pretend Hen Cove is behind us here. Let's pretend that there was no way we could go around it. How would we get across Hen Cove, right? We might say, we all have to get over to the other side. What are we going to do? Well, we could get a boat, right? And we could say, well, everybody, if you want to get across, you're going to have to get your own boat, right? Go buy your own boat and get across, and we'll all be over there. By the way, we all have to go, otherwise we all get in trouble. Oh, and also, by the way, you're going to have to spend a lot of money on a motor for that boat because there's a heavy current in that body of water, and if you just use a rowboat, you're not going to be able to get across. We wouldn't expect everybody to go out and buy their own boat to get across this body of water, right? We would engage as a community, as a society, to put our resources together, come up with some better way of doing that. Maybe we get a ferry and we get us all across. Maybe we build a bridge to get across. So we utilize infrastructure. Now, there are a lot of different types of infrastructure in the world, right? There are bridges and roads and wastewater pipes, which is really what I'm here to talk about. There are water pipes, internet, power utilities, all those different kinds of things, right? When it comes to solving these problems that we have, that we've all agreed that we're contributing to with our septic systems and this nitrogen problem, there are a few ways that we can engage infrastructure. One of the main ways, who's heard of sewering, right? We all know sewering. What are some other, does anybody have some other ones that we've heard about? There was one just a second ago, right?
Nitrogen treating septic systems.
Nitrogen treating septic systems, right. Oysters, permeable reactive barriers, right? There are a lot of different ways that we can pool our resources as a society to help to resolve these problems. So my focus is really just to talk to you about the IA technologies, but you really have to look at these watersheds that we live in a very a holistic approach. It can't just be to say, we're just going to do this in that watershed, or we're just going to do that, especially if we want to come up with the most economical way of solving that problem, right? The Cape Cod bridges are a big problem, and we're going to spend something like, $5-6 billion on replacing those bridges. That's a lot of money, and we also have to solve this wastewater problem that we have. We have to come up with the most economic solution for that, because we can't just spend all of our public resources on that one problem. We have a lot of housing problems, et cetera. So I have a little bag of tricks here. My communication contractor put this together. This bag, by the way, wouldn't have been my first choice, but it's workable. So obviously, is it? I don't even know. So this is our problem here, and I have a few of these if anybody would like. You look like you know. You're holding up the sign, so you deserve one of those. But here's our problem, and I think a lot of times we talk about nitrogen, but we don't really talk about what nitrogen actually is. So our bodies excrete what's called urea through our urine, and that urea breaks down into ammonia. This is ammonia. It's a nitrogen with 3 hydrogen atoms attached to it. And our septic systems are pretty good at taking this ammonia and converting it into this little guy, this is nitrate. So there's some bacteria in there that break that down into this. This is a nitrogen with 2 oxygens on it. They actually use that for growth. And then they generate this little molecule here. This is nitrate. So this is nitrogen with 3 oxygens on it. This is like public enemy number 1 that we're talking about today. This is the one that our Title V systems produce in large amounts that gets into our groundwater and makes its way out into places like Hen Cove and causes all the problems that we have out there. So the name of the game of wastewater treatment for the most part, at least when we're talking about Cape Cod and the nitrogen problem, is how do we get rid of this? And how do we take this and turn it into nitrogen gas? This is sort of the end game that we're all shooting for when it comes to at least treating wastewater, is to take all of that nitrate and turn it into nitrogen gas, which is like 78% of our atmosphere. We're all breathing it and living in it right now. It's a very stable molecule. So wastewater treatment systems are very efficient at doing that. We also have these what are called alternative septic systems. So in the state of Massachusetts, we have Title V systems. I mean, a lot of you probably have a Title V system. If you have a cesspool, not great, but you know they're still out there in the world. So to start with, a cesspool is basically a pit where the toilet flushes and everything just goes into that pit. It starts to break down. And they do really a minimal amount of treatment. It's really just to get rid of your wastewater. And you might say, well, okay, we have Title V, and the state has told us we have to do Title V. Surely that's better than a cesspool. Well, it is in some regards. It's really still intended to make sure wastewater gets away from people. And it's really, Title V is what we call a disposal code. It's intended to get wastewater away from people as quickly as possible and to get it safely into the environment so that people don't get sick, so we're not coming into contact with it. And unfortunately, these Title V systems, while they are a good thing in some ways, they've addressed one problem, this major public health problem of cesspools. They've created this other problem because they don't very efficiently take that nitrate and turn it into nitrogen gas, and it goes into the atmosphere where we don't have a problem with it anymore, right? So along come these advanced septic system technologies. We call them IA septic system technologies, innovative alternative. I think it's a horrible word, but that's the word I'm going to use for today. IA technologies are modifications in a lot of ways to standard Title V systems to make them so that they can remove things like nitrate, or that they can remove things like phosphorus, which is a huge concern in our freshwater bodies. So the Massachusetts Alternative Septic System Test Center, which is one of my programs, we're located right out on Joint Base Cape Cod. I bet you didn't know that there was a really high-tech facility right here on Cape Cod where high-tech technologies are developed. At that facility, we provide a location for third-party companies to come who have these advanced technologies and say, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We say, come to our test center and prove it. So they'll bring their technologies and they'll prove it or they won't. I will say a lot of them go home with their tail between their legs. But there have been some pretty big successes that have come out of that facility. And those technologies are now coming into the market and we are available for folks to start to use those. So this is where the towns are now coming along, plodding along slowly in their wastewater treatment planning process to address this nitrate problem. Really, we've only had sewers as the best option. But now we're starting to see these newer IA technologies which perform much better than some of the more historic technologies. And towns are starting to say, well, hang on a second. Maybe if we can do some of these IA systems and limit the sewer, we can get the cost of this overall project down, right? I mean, that's one of the goals, hopefully, of our town officials is to say, we want to try to save us all some money. We're going to find the best way of doing this. So a lot of the towns are starting to turn their attention toward how to do that. Falmouth is one of those that is actively engaged right now in trying to figure out how to do that. The town of Wellfleet is trying to figure out how to do that. Brewster has been trying to figure out how to do that. An assortment of towns even beyond that is trying to figure out how do we utilize sewer where sewer makes sense because it is expensive, and how do we use IA technologies to help supplement or fill in some of the gaps and keep the cost down. So that's where some of the other programs come in that I work at Barnstable County. So if we have those technologies, right, the next question might be, well, how do you pay for those technologies? And that's where our Aqua Fund program comes in. And I have a couple flyers available, brochures, if anybody wants to come and get one after the talk. Aqua Fund is our low-interest loan program to help homeowners to pay for the cost of putting in these systems. Now, that's assuming that homeowners are going to be fully responsible for the cost of paying for those systems. But the way that program is set up is if your town has some sort of a nitrogen plan in place, that could be like a CWMP or a TWMP, which is a comprehensive wastewater management plan, or a targeted wastewater management plan, or some sort of plan in place, the owners who live in that region can access up to a zero, or as low as a 0% loan through that. There's some income qualifiers that go with that. We're trying to target the lowest interest rates to the people who need the most help. But we have 0, 2, and 4% loans that are available to homeowners to help them pay that cost. Because these systems can be a bit expensive. Sewer's expensive. These IE technologies are a bit cheaper, but they're still expensive. And we certainly don't want to saddle everybody with a $50,000 new septic system, right? I think we can all agree, you know, not all of us have that free cash just laying around. So that program is available, and I've been actively working at the county to try to identify and work with the state on, and the individual towns on, creative ways in which we can help subsidize some of that cost, right? So with my getting across the bay in the boat example, you know, you might expect that the homeowner could put the shell of the boat together, but maybe we all help them get the motor on their boat, so that we can all hopefully get across and fix the problem that we have. So I've been working on things like, can we put together a loan forgiveness program? Can the town subsidize through the tax base? Can we borrow from the state revolving fund to help pay for some of these things? If we're going to do that level of subsidization and thinking about infrastructure in terms of sewering, if we're going to utilize IE systems to accomplish the same end, we should figure out ways to put together that same funding package to help those homeowners who are going to have to use these IE technologies instead of getting the benefit of sewer. So then after you kind of get past the funding piece, which is not a small piece of it, you might say, well, okay, now we've got all these advanced technologies in our backyard. How are we going to maintain those? Like, how do we make sure they're going to continue to run? Because we're going to put them in to solve a problem. Obviously, we need to make sure that they're functioning properly, right? So typically what happens is somebody will come out and test your system if you have one of these advanced technologies. They'll come in, they'll take a sample, check all the pumps, check all the run times on things. And that occurs anywhere from once a year to 4 times a year, kind of depends on the technology and where you're at. And as a homeowner, you're fully responsible for the cost of that contract and organizing that contract and making sure that you have it in perpetuity. And they can be a little bit expensive. As the homeowner, you're also responsible, by the way, for the whole not only funding the capital piece, but organizing all that yourself. So finding a designer, going through that process, going to Board of Health, getting an installer. So there are quite a few pieces that, as homeowners, if you're going to end up with an IE system, fall squarely and fully on your shoulders to help solve this public problem that we all have, which is nitrogen contamination of our bays and estuaries. So the third program that we've been working on at Barnstable County to put together is what's called the Septic Utility Program. And it sounds maybe a bit big and maybe scary to some, but really what it's about is putting together a package of services to help homeowners work through this whole process, so from start to finish. So potentially helping through the design process or organizing how things go with installations to make sure systems get installed and designed properly. We could put together packages of programs to help organize sort of that financial piece of things for homeowners and make sure everybody's availing themselves of all the tax credits that are available and all the programs that are available. And then over the long term, helping homeowners through that whole operation and maintenance piece of things. And there are a lot of different ways that we can do that, and we're trying to get as creative as we can to figure that out, because I'm from upstate New York. I have a lot of respect for private property, but I also understand that we need to come up with a better way of doing this that's a little bit more integrated to make sure that not only are we putting out technologies that work, but also that they're functioning the way that they need to be, so that places like Hen Cove get cleaned up and are enjoyable for, my kids are 4, 6, and 10. I would hope someday that they could come out here with their children and show them a place like this and enjoy it. So those are the three main programs that we've been working on at Barnstable County. We're also looking at a lot of the sort of tangential issues that go along with those things. Workforce development is a huge one. No offense to anybody here, there's not a lot of young people in this crowd, right? That's kind of indicative of the workforce situation in Cape Cod. We don't have a lot of young people coming in, particularly not just into the trades, but particularly into the wastewater industry or the water treatment industry. A lot of folks are retiring out, and it's the industry's not being filled back in. So we've been working with the tech schools, with 4Cs, and through our program to try to figure out how can we entice not only younger members of our society to come and engage themselves in what I think is a really exciting thing, which is wastewater treatment. How can we entice those maybe mid-career changers, those people who are doing something and want to do something different now? How can we entice them to come into the industry? So we're working on that workforce development piece, because we can come up with all these great plans of how we're going to solve that problem, but if we don't have the people in place to actually put the systems in the ground and run them long term, whether we're talking about IA technologies or sewers or PRBs or oysters or any of those things, we're going to fall flat on our faces. So I think that's a really important aspect of all of that. We're also working a lot on public education. We're expanding out our public education piece. I come to a lot of these events, but we also want people to be able to come to our facility at Mass TC and actually see how technologies work. Now, I know there are a few people here who have come and taken a tour. I mean, could you put up your hand if you've been there before, Mass TC? There's a few. It's a pretty great tour. I don't want to, toot my own horn, but we do a pretty good job with our tour. You can come and learn how these technologies work. You can see them in the ground. You can smell them if you want to. They're actually not that bad, believe it or not. And actually, the treatment plant next door smells worse. One of the things we're adding at our facility is a new public education and training space where folks can come out, and we'll be doing more educational programming. And you'll also have the opportunity to see these technologies up close. And one of the things we're adding to that is composting and urine diversion toilets, which is a whole other sort of subset of this wastewater treatment thing. We call it ecological sanitation. Rather than putting our waste into our clean drinking water and then flushing it and trying to remove that waste again, utilizing all this technology, treatment plants and IA systems, if we can figure out how to divert that off in a different stream and then potentially reuse it or figure out a different way to utilize it, I think there are a lot of advantages there. So at that facility, rather than a men's and ladies' rooms, we're going to have a urine diversion room and a composting toilet diversion room. You'll actually be able to come out and see how those things work. Kick the tires if you want to. And you'll also be able to go outside and see how the composting unit works. We're building a whole shed, so that'll be part of the tour at Mass TC coming up. So you can actually see how these things work. So that's like a subset of the things that we're working on. We're trying to figure out how do we get our arms around this big problem from the standpoint primarily of on-site wastewater treatment. I think the towns have generally got a pretty good handle on how to do sewering. There's a playbook for sewering. There's a lot of money to be made in sewering, which I hate to say, but it's true. There are consulting firms that are like multi-billion-dollar consulting firms that work on sewering projects. There are not multi-billion-dollar consulting firms working on IA systems. So as a region, we need to figure out how to make this work on our own. And at Barnstable County, we're trying to figure out how can we put a package of services together to help the towns. We're here to help the towns. At Barnstable County, we have no regulatory authority. We're just here to help. So how can we put those services together to help your town, or Falmouth, or Sandwich, address these problems and figure out how to use these technologies, because I think they're an important piece of the puzzle. I see I've got 2 minutes left. I want to leave you on a positive note, though, because a lot of people ask, what can I do today, right? Like, I'm not going to put in an IA system tomorrow. What are some things I could do now? One that always comes up is pumping. Pumping your septic system, that's good. Do it every 3 to 5 years. Really what that does, you're not really keeping necessarily more nitrogen out of the bay and estuary, but you're protecting your system and making sure it's functioning as good as it can. One of the other things you can do, I'll go into my little bag of tricks here, a couple little things here. So thinking at the sink, these are little strainers so you can keep food particles out of your septic system. This is great. If you can keep as much food out as you can, it's good for the health of your system. Basically, you just put that in the kitchen sink and it catches all the little scraps and things, and then you tap it out in the trash, or better yet, in the compost bin. I'm an advocate for composting as well. So do that. One of the other things you can do is make sure you're not sending oil and grease down your drain. That's one of the biggest killers of on-site wastewater treatment. It's also one of the biggest killers of treatment plants as well. Don't flush oil and grease down the drain no matter what, because because it might flow nicely down the drain when you're flushing it down with hot water, but we all know that grease congeals eventually when it cools off, congeals on the inside of all the pipes, or in a septic tank, it'll actually congeal and make a thicker scum layer on the top. It'll mess up treatment plants. So get all that stuff off your plates, don't wash it down the drain. There's like a 99-cent scraper. I think you can get these at Bed Bath & Beyond, or I don't know, wherever, internet, probably Amazon is where I got these. Scrape that grease off. Get as much of it off as you can. Don't send it down the drain. Those are important things that you can do every day to help right now until we all figure out how to address this problem as a society. So I think you want to do questions now, or hold that after? Sure, sure. So thank you so much for having me out here today, and I'll be happy to answer questions later on.
Thank you so much, Brian. That was fantastic. So we're going to switch gears a little bit now to something that's a little more closer to our area. So the town of Bourne, this originally was talked about 4 or 5 years ago. I think Frank and I talked about it with Sam Haynes, and that is a stormwater drainage system. Because of our topography, we have behind us, you can see the hill, and all of our Circuit and Sacco and Park Street all filter down, and that water and animal waste and excess fertilizer and salt from the roads, it all ends up in Hen Cove. So we're working on a rain garden project, which we have a grant for, but the town, along with the federal government, is funding a stormwater drainage system for our area. So there are posters in the back here, if you would like to check it out. The posters say where these drains will be built. So the town has a 25% cost in this project, and that money has already been voted by town meeting last fall. So what we're waiting for is the 75% from the federal government, which we're told is any minute. So we're going to bring up our expert on the system, Dan Barnett. Could you come up and say a few words about this project?
Sure, let's bring Simone up too.
Oh, Simone. Oh, I didn't see you there, Simone. My bad. This is Simone Wright, and she comes to us from Barnstable County also. She'll tell you a little bit more. But so the system is pretty much shovel ready. So as soon as we get the money, this can get started. Some of you summer people could come back next spring or next summer, and it would be all installed. So Simone Wright, Dan Barnett.
Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm not Dan. But my name is Simone Wright. I grew up in Buzzards Bay. This is my home. I work for the Cape Cod Conservation District. We are a locally led government organization. We serve all 15 towns on Cape Cod, and our role is to help distribute federally funded projects to all of the towns on Cape Cod for salt marsh restoration and fish passage, and also for stormwater infrastructure projects. So this is part of the Cape Cod Water Resources Restoration Program, which is kind of a big deal. And actually, we're very lucky to have our program manager, Martha Craig, here as well. She keeps everything moving. She's a wonderful program manager. And I'm the stormwater project manager, so it's my responsibility to basically keep all of these stormwater projects across Cape Cod moving, make sure that the towns are well represented, and make sure that the natural resource conservation program, I guess? Wait, NRCS. Natural Resource Conservation Service, which is the USDA kind of arm that is responsible for providing these funds to the Cape. Make sure that these projects go in right and that everything's being done the way they're supposed to be done. So what we're doing here is really exciting. We have an opportunity to install some kind of innovative technologies here in these uphill areas around Hen Cove. Our goal is to reduce bacteria runoff from stormwater The reason that we got this money is because Hen Cove is a valuable shellfish habitat, and the federal government has recognized that on Cape Cod, shellfish is a really important aspect of agriculture, which is not typical of the rest of the country. So we have received this awesome opportunity to make sure that we can protect that shellfish habitat and make sure that it stays available to all of the people that rely on shellfish for both their, commercial and recreational purposes. So when we take stormwater and we filter it into the ground, we have an opportunity to remove bacteria out of that stormwater and prevent it from running into the cove. Bacteria is ultimately what affects your ability to safely go out and harvest shellfish. That's what the national standards are based on. And that is the reason why the inner part of Hen Cove is closed to shellfishing right now, is because of stormwater. So if we're able to reduce the amount of bacteria coming down off the hill, then maybe you guys can shellfish right off the beach someday. And wouldn't that be nice? Yeah. So I've got some fact sheets that I brought along that tell you a little bit more about the Cape Cod Water Resources Restoration Project. Am I running out of time?
Well, you'll find out when you're running out of time.
Okay. So this project in particular, because we're using some of this new technology, well, we've proposed to use some of this new technology if all the paperwork goes through within RCS. The town would be receiving around $630,000 from the federal government to install this new exciting technology. We've got something called a jellyfish filter that we'd like to put in here. And I'd like to invite Dan to tell you a little bit more about the engineering side of things.
Hi. So my background is I retired from NRCS a couple of years ago. And so I have been doing stormwater designs since the early 2000s. Early 2000s. And so I am part of a team that designed this package. I was the design engineer, but we have other engineers and we have other natural resource experts that are just super professional. So the design package here is, in my opinion, one of the best I've seen, and it's comparable to the large architectural engineering firms, if I do say so myself. But it's because we've had a really good team. A little bit about what we're doing here is we're capturing the 1 inch of runoff, which contains all the pollutants or most of the pollutants, and our target pollutant is bacteria. And what we're doing with it, we're catching it with a trench drain, and then we're putting it into a drain manhole. I'm going to try to not get too engineering on you here. And then we're going to put it into underground subsurface infiltration units. The lower sections of Circuit, Saco, and Park are going to have the jellyfish component in it. And the jellyfish component also treats nitrogen and phosphorus. So that helps remove those things. Those units are pretty expensive, so we just chose to put them at the lower ends. Farther up, higher in elevation, we have the systems that don't have the jellyfish. And there's going to be 8 systems going in, and they work. And I think that's pretty much about it.
Sounds good to me, Dan.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Dan. So just a little bit more about Dan. First of all, the locations and some of the descriptions of what these systems will look like are on poster boards back here. So if you want to take a look, are there 8, Dan? Is that how many?
8 sites.
There are 8 different sites starting up all of the hill streets and then also at the bottom. So you can take a look at what it's going to look like. Dan, we met Dan and Simone back in December, and Dan kind of bought into our whole shtick. So Dan is now a volunteer engineer for the PWQC rain garden project, and he has done immense work. So dovetailing right into that, I'm going to bring up the rain garden committee and have them talk a little bit about the hoops we're jumping through or not jumping through yet, as far as our rain garden project is concerned. Paula? Bob? Paula Serta? Bob Dwyer.
Good morning. Thank you, everybody, for coming. As most of you have heard, you've seen in the newsletters and the emails, this little committee, as a subset of the PWQC board, got a grant from EPA's Southern New England or Southeastern New England project or program for a total of $50,000 to implement rain gardens, or called best management practices stormwater controls at 3 locations that we proposed here along Circuit Avenue, around Circuit Avenue. The 3 locations, there's one over near Bellboy, there's another one at the bottom of Park Street, and a third one is over at 214 Circuit Avenue, opposite. Past the beach. These are on the grassy side of the street. The essential capability of these systems is that they capture and they infiltrate rainwater, and with it they strip out whatever pollutants are in there, and to the extent that they have nitrogen, phosphorus, and other things, that forms the basis for growing essentially wetland plants along those areas. The designs on these can be relatively simple. They've been well proven in many, many locations all around. There are companies that have installed them all around Cape Cod. Some of them are going to be a little bit more complex. The one at the bottom of Park Street is going to be something that's going to have to infiltrate water. At the same time, it's probably going to have to just attenuate, slow down water. This is a cartoon that Dan, our very capable volunteer, has drawn on that. It's kind of a little, it looks like a Circus Maximus a little bit. It's a little racetrack to try to infiltrate the water, or whatever it can't infiltrate, it will slow down before it gets out to Hen Cove. Now, the complexities of this are, number one, we have to get, we're on town land, so we're in close coordination with the town. We were told that because we're close to tidal wetlands, that we have to go and get a determination from the Conservation Commission about whether or not the town wetland bylaw applies. So we're in the process of doing that. We're going to hire a contractor, and it looks like it's going to be BSC. Where's Keith? Right?
Yeah, BSC.
Who have been working along Hen Cove doing surveying around on Circuit Avenue over the years. The advantage there is they already have some surveyed points. We both have to survey the elevations along the road, so you'll see surveyors out there. There'll be other people working along the coastal bank trying to identify the nature and locations of wetland plants. We have to report those to the town. And then the surveys get turned over to Dan's company. I have to give the company name correctly. It's Cape Cod and Cape Coral Imagineering LLC. How's that for a name? Okay. So he's volunteering his company's time to do the detailed design for these. Again, these are going to be down gradient or downhill from the system that Simone and Dan described that's being funded by the federal government. But this is all the water that falls on road surfaces or runs off lawns, down gradient to that. In addition, it'll hopefully capture some of anything that runs over after the 1-inch rainfall goes. As we found out the other day, the rain isn't staying at the 1-inch level, even though the designs for these things are. In any case, the engineering on this will then come up with a set of plans, and we're going to start and get the Bellboy rain garden constructed this year. And that's where all of you come in. We've got money from the federal government. Our grant is, quote, $50,000, but basically about 25% of that is in-kind volunteer labor, time, donation of equipment. And the labor donated here is sitting right in front of me. So I'm going to turn it over to our volunteer coordinator, Paula. Where's Paula?
Right here. Thanks, Bob. Yes, that's how you can help, is to agree to volunteer to some hours to put into the rain garden. And listening to Brian talk, I'm going to take it a step further. If you have adult children that like to come to the Cape and use your property and the water right there, consider having them volunteer some time also. I mean, they're the ones that are going to benefit from all of the work that you've heard about. So that sounds like a really reasonable idea. When the go dates are finalized, the committee will send out notices and let you know when each rain garden will be built. And that's when we will start talking about who will volunteer for that. I know there are a lot of really good gardeners here. You don't have to be a really good gardener to get involved in this project. Every single person will be able to help in some way. We did one at Town Hall. A few of us volunteered over there. It was a really enjoyable couple of hours. And it's a way to be able to really participate in everything that you've heard about today. So we'll let you know when we're ready for the volunteers, but think about it and think about your kids.
Thank you, Bob and Paula. So we already have a bunch of volunteers lined up, so don't think that all of you are going to have to dig all the holes. We have volunteers from United Rental with equipment. Mahoney's Garden Center is volunteered to give us a tremendous discount on plants, and there are specific plants that go in the rain garden. We have J&J Materials is going to provide material. So it's a joint project, and once we get going building the first one, then we're going to be way better at the second one. So our one of the things that happens with our whole town wastewater plan, our area wastewater plan, we're in the Pocasset Harbor watershed. So we need to have a TMDL study done on our water before we can start enforcing these new rules. So we have the two most experienced experts at TMDLs that I have ever met. And this is Rachel Jakuba, who's the Vice President of Science, and Corin Peterson, who's the Vice President of Water Advocacy. Easy for them to say. Ladies, it's all yours.
We each get a mic. This might be dangerous. So, good morning, and thank you. I want to thank Keith and the rest of the board for inviting us out to speak to you today. So, I'm Corin Peterson. I'm the Vice President of Clean Water Advocacy for the Buzzards Bay Coalition. For those of you who are not familiar with the Buzzards Bay Coalition, we are a regional membership-supported nonprofit. We are dedicated to the restoration, protection, and sustainable use of Buzzards Bay and more than in all of its 30-plus harbors and coves around the bay. We work in 21 different communities, from Little Compton, Rhode Island, all the way up the bay, all the way up as far as Middleborough to Wareham, Bourne, Falmouth, and even on Martha's Vineyard. So the way we work around the bay is we work with all of the communities on conservation efforts, restoration efforts, a lot of education, and advocacy. We've heard a lot today about what is the greatest long-term threat to the health of Buzzards Bay, not just Brook Harbor, Hen Cove, and Pocasset, though it is a great threat there, but what we're struggling with in southeastern New England generally is nitrogen pollution. And we're going to talk about a TMDL, what that is, why it's important, and that helps us solve this problem. So the Federal Clean Water Act requires states to set water quality standards for all of its estuaries. The standards that the Commonwealth has set out here for Pocasset, Hen Cove, and Red Brook is that it should be the most pristine coastal water body. It should meet the top standards. It doesn't. So the coalition has been monitoring water quality in these harbors for more than 30 years. And our data shows that there was water quality decline. It was not meeting what the states indicated the standards should be. So the coalition petitioned in 2014 to have it listed on what's called the Federal Clean Water's 303D list. It's fondly called the dirty waters list. It's for those waters that don't meet state standards. And so it was listed in 2014 as requiring a total maximum daily load. So once you get a water on that 303D list, then now it's the state's responsibility to establish a total maximum daily load. So while the state was going around spending a lot of money on other estuaries, it did not fund a nutrient study to support a TMDL for Brook Harbor, Pocasset, and Hen Cove. And so the town of Bourne has sort of struggled to actually come up with the science to support this TMDL. It is a top priority for the coalition to get a TMDL established for these waters, and so we have been doing a lot of fundraising, applying for grants, and to do all of the science needed to have a TMDL established. And Rachel, as the Vice President of Bay Science, she has led all of those efforts, so I'm going to turn it over to her.
Thanks, Corin. And before I get into sort of the science that we've done, we've talked a lot about nitrogen pollution this morning, but I just want to make sure that everybody's totally on the same page of what we're talking about when we talk about nitrogen pollution. So nitrogen is a building block of life. It's a natural element. We all, we have it in our bodies. All the living things in the water have it in their bodies. And so it's natural, but too much of a good thing is a problem, right? So when we have excessive nitrogen, we get an abundance of algae, both sort of, the floating algae in the water and the macroalgae on the bottom. And that excess of algae, it makes our waters murky, it makes our bottoms mucky, and as these organisms as they die and get degraded by bacteria, it consumes the oxygen in the water quality. So that makes it then hard for fish and shellfish to thrive in our waters, which is obviously not what we want. So where does nitrogen come from? We've talked about some of the sources, right? We've talked about wastewater. It comes from all of us. It comes from stormwater, so water running off of roads and making it into the water. It comes from fertilizers, and it comes also from the atmosphere. Those are sort of the major sources on Cape Cod. Wastewater being right at the top of the ticket, as Brian said. That's our biggest problem for fighting the nitrogen pollution problem here. It's wastewater. And as Corin said, so since the early 90s, the coalition has been monitoring water quality in all the water bodies here in Pocasset. And what we see there, so what we monitor for is we look for the impacts of nitrogen pollution. So we look at how much dissolved oxygen is in the water, how clear is the water, and we do this both with scientists at the Marine Biological Lab, so analyzing water quality samples for how much nitrogen and how much algal pigments are in the water. And we also do it with a huge number of volunteers. So that's another way people can get involved in cleaning up the water, is volunteering with the coalition to become a Bay Watcher. Our Bay Watchers go out every 5 days in the summer and take samples to understand, again, how much oxygen is in the water for the plants to thrive and the organisms to thrive, and how clear are our waters. So as Corin said, we've taken this science to the state to show that we have a problem here. And so once we know we have a problem, that's the first step, but then we have to figure out, what do we do about this problem? And so the TMDL, which is basically a nitrogen pollution budget, we're trying to figure out how much nitrogen, because we're not going to get rid of all the nitrogen going into the water, but how much nitrogen can go into that water and we still have a thriving, clean bay. What does that mean, and what does it look like? So we've done this, so the state, the way they've approached this problem is to understand that every water body is unique. So the amount of nitrogen that Hen Cove can take might be different from, just around the bend, Pocasset Harbor. And understanding how these water bodies are flushed, what's coming into them, takes really detailed science at the local level. And as Corin said, the state hasn't done it, and the coalition really wanted to see these waters cleaned up. So what we've done is we've cobbled together a series of grants over the last 5 years, even more, 6 years, to try and get this science done. So we've had 3 different grants from the state. We've had grants that have been specifically to support our work in Brook Harbor. We've had private foundations, and we've also had pieces of grants, federal grants for sort of overall coalition efforts to help fund the work that we're doing here. So what are the things that we need to know? So first of all, we need to know, where is the nitrogen coming from? So the nitrogen, I think a lot of times we think about the nitrogen that we see running off or from the septic systems right around the harbor, but that's just a piece of the watershed. So the watershed, and we have some handouts in the back that show a map of the watershed, it actually stretches all the way onto Joint Base Cape Cod. So there's this sort of teardrop shaped piece of land, and every piece of nitrogen that goes into those places ends up in our water bodies here. So it's the septic systems all along that stretch, it's the roads all along the stretch, it's the golf course, it's all these things that are feeding nitrogen into our watershed, and so it's going into the groundwater, and the groundwater is making it here to the water body. And so we need to understand what is the nitrogen coming in, and that work we're doing in partnership with the Buzzards Bay National Estuary Program. So they're doing a lot of modeling of land use, so looking at GIS maps to understand, how many septic systems, how many feet of road, where are all these sources of nitrogen in the watershed. And once we understand how much is coming from each source, we also want to understand, are there any changes to it as it's making its way to the water body? So is it going through any ponds or any other systems that might sort of filter out some of that nitrogen along the way? And then what we have to figure out is once the nitrogen gets to the water body, how much nitrogen can that water body handle? And so it's looking at historically how have indicators of health of this water body changed over time. One of the key indicators is eelgrass. So eelgrass, it's a rooted plant. It needs sunlight filtering through the water column for it to be able to grow. And so where we have healthy eelgrass beds, we know we have clear water, and we know we have, great habitat for fish, shellfish, all the organisms that we want to see in our waters. And so the state has a program where they've been monitoring eelgrass for a very long time. Most recently, they did a survey in 2021 to look at how eelgrass has changed. So over the last 30 years, there's been a lot of eelgrass lost around here. So especially like the backside of Bassett's Island, Wings Neck, Scraggy Neck, around the shallow waters where eelgrass could grow, we've lost a lot of it. So we know that we need to improve the water quality so we can get that eelgrass back. We also look at, in terms of eelgrass being an important indicator, another indicator is what about the organisms living on the bottom? So our benthic habitat, the bottom of the water. When we have a really healthy ecosystem, the bottom habitat, we have an abundance of organisms, we have different species of organisms. As the water quality degrades and we end up with more mucky sediments, we get fewer organisms and both a fewer number of organisms and fewer species represented, which we don't want. So again, we've done a study with the Mass Maritime Academy it wrapped up in 2021, looking at benthic habitat out here. We've also been measuring water quality, so that's, again, with our volunteers. We also have some instruments in the water this summer that take measurements. So our volunteers go out every 5 days, which is awesome and a really rich record. But we have instruments in the water this summer taking measurements every 10 minutes. So getting a really high resolution information about 3 different sites so Pocasset Harbor, Hen Cove, and Brook Harbor. Okay, what am I missing here?
Rachel, do you know the timing on the TMDL?
So yes, let me talk for a minute about the timing. And we have a handout over here that has some of this information on here. So the science, we're finishing up all the field work this summer that we need. Once we have the field work complete, then we're going to be drafting the scientific report. So the scientific report we're aiming to get to Mass DEP by May of next year. So that's wrapping together all these different pieces of science and showing how much nitrogen the harbor can handle and once we know how much can the harbor handle, how much is coming in, then the difference is what we have to remove. The difference is the problem. And so that's where, when we have that science, we'll present it to Mass DEP, and then they'll review it, the science, and they take our scientific report, and they'll convert that into a TMDL. So I'm guessing it's going to take them about a year. We don't really know. These things they don't happen very fast at the state, but it's one of the coalition's roles, and it's one of the roles that the Pocasset Water Coalition can help with as well, is really pushing the state So the state, it can be very risk averse and not want to go too fast and make a mistake. But at the same time, we all see, the problems with water quality, so we want to get them to move. And it's, as a number of organizations and citizens working to make sure that the state moves forward with what needs to happen. And there will be, once the state develops a TMDL, there will be a public comment period, and that's something we'll make sure everybody's well aware of and gets out to say yes, please. Let's not wait. Let's get this in place so that we can start improving water quality. Yeah, I think that's it.
So the importance of the TMDL is that the TMDL will declare our area as a nitrogen-sensitive area. Until that happens, the clock can't start on enforcing the new regulations for the new Title V. So the TMDL is wicked important. So we're so glad that these two young ladies were able to come today and explain to us what it actually is. Thank you. Thank you both. Kathy, so the last speaker is Kathy. So this is Kathy Fox-Alfano. She and I are on the Bourne Wastewater Advisory Committee. Are we the South representatives? Yes. Yes, we are the South. We're the representatives for this side of the canal. So we've been working on this now for a couple of years. COVID was a pain in the neck. So we've started back at it again, and what our committee is going to do is recommend to the town what we suggest for the comprehensive wastewater management plan. So that will be a process that once we finalize it, it will go before town meeting to be approved, because it's not going to be cheap. So, it's all of this is a process, and we tried to bring people today who are all part of the process to get everyone to understand. So our mission for our Pocasset Water Quality Coalition, we're trying to make the improvements, but we feel it's as important or more important for all of you to be educated on how all this works, what it all means. It's quite a task when you think about. Several speakers mentioned how the head of Hen Cove is close to shellfishing. So you can go on, we have it on our website, you can go on the natural resources page of the town of Bourne and see the black area at the head of Hen Cove. So that imaginary line runs from Wabash, is that right, Frank? Yes. From Wabash right across to Hill Street. Inside of that line, you are not allowed to shellfish because it's not going to be a good problem if you do. So that has existed, for the best we can figure out, for 40 years that we haven't been able to shellfish at the head of Hen Cove. If you put that in perspective, some of us have kids that haven't been able to shellfish at Hen Cove for more than that. So, Kathy, thank you.
First of all, I want to say, wow, how lucky are we to have these people to help us solve this problem? I mean, this is outstanding. It really is. I really admire this. The one thing, we can't stop peeing tomorrow, right? But you can stop using fertilizer, because as well as the herbicides and pesticides, whatever, it's nitrogen, and that is what fertilizer is. So if you can please stop using fertilizer, that will immediately help with all the situation, right? And and it's easy, right? I mean, we don't have to have gorgeous green lawns. This lawn isn't bad, and I bet you don't use fertilizer, right? Clover is a huge help. Stays green, right? So there's ways to do this immediately. So it's not going to solve the problem, but it will make it better. So we are working hard in the wastewater management advisory committee. It takes forever. Everything takes forever. It's amazing. But we're hoping that not this next town meeting, but the following one in the spring, that we may be able to bring this to you. We hope so. So please vote for that. All right?
My turn?
Your turn.
So, the fertilizer thing, if any of you know where my wife and I live, right by our house, we have a nice green lawn, we have weeds, we have tons of clover, and we don't use pesticides, or we use natural only fertilizer, no nitrogen. So it can work as long as you don't want it to look like Fenway Park. So anyway, what Kathy and I started out was, so we're in this group, the Pocasset Water Quality Coalition, not the Wastewater Advisory Committee, we're in favor of watershed permits. So a watershed permit is the way for the town / the state to enforce these new Title V regulations. So the watershed permit would allow the town to have 20 years to enforce that rule. With, if our opinion were work, it would be the first 500 yards from the water, those people have to change their to an IA system first. Then the next 1,000 feet, and these would be a tiered system, and it would be over a 5-year span. Each section would get that. So if the town goes in the other direction, which would be letting the state enforce the new regulations, then there's a 2-year waiting period, and after that, everybody that I can see, everybody that I can't see over on Bassett or on Patchawisset, whoever else, we all would have 5 years to do it. So think about supply and demand. If you have any economic background, supply and demand to have it all done in 5 years, impossible. So that's why our group, the Pocasset Water Quality Coalition, we are in favor of a watershed permit system for Bourne. So, is that enough? Enough of that. Okay, so Kathy and I wrap up the speaker program. So I just have a couple of notes that I'm supposed to say. So we as part of the rain garden, we had some drone photos taken last Labor Day. So the two of them, I think the two of the best, are in the back here posted up on a board. If anyone would like one of those to print themselves, we can send it to you digitally. Just let us know. So the other thing that I'm supposed to mention is this poster. So for a couple of years now, we've been trying to figure out Facebook, but we're all old and we could not figure it out. So we started out where we had a Facebook group. Well, that is not what we need. So now we have a Facebook page, which is cool. So we reached out to many of you and asked for help. Several people responded. So far, the first one to respond is 2 houses over from us. Jackie Ferguson, she has done more in a week than I would have never been able to do. So we now have an active, legit Facebook page, Pocasset Water Quality Coalition. We need followers, we need likers, and instead of sending repeated emails, we're going to try to post information on Facebook to have fewer emails, because we all know that's everybody's #1 goal, is fewer emails. So please look us up on Facebook. Drawing pictures. The other thing would be to check your spam folder. If you're not receiving our emails, they may be in your spam folder. So last but not least, so the board is not all here today. We're missing 3. So we're 9 of us, and 7 of us are over 70. So we need help. We need more. We can change the board of directors. We can have more people. We're not firing anybody, but we certainly could use some young minds who understand Facebook or just want to help. Because if your kids aren't playing here yet, they will be, and your grandkids should be playing here also. And we need the water to get fixed. We need to be able to see your feet when you walk 20 feet out. You need to be able to get the mud off between your toes, And we can do that one step at a time by following all the instructions we've gotten this morning. So we thank everybody for coming. I don't think we acknowledge our select board chair, MJ Mastrangelo, a longtime supporter of our group, is here this morning. So we're going to go to questions. So we have two microphones. We have a walk-around microphone. So if there are questions, raise your hand and we'll bring you a mic. Bob? Who are you going to ask?
I've got a question for Brian or maybe Corin. The new state regulations have something embedded in them called a responsible management entity. Brian described a couple of county programs where the county was going to assist people to try to implement the very complex roadmap to get an IA system installed. But the towns also need hand-holding. Is each town supposed to set up this responsible management entity that's required to administer these watershed permits, or is there any activity in the county to try to help to do this and do something Barnstable County-wide?
Yes, so responsible management entity is a big, scary, bureaucratic term for sure. Really, it's just a set of programs put together to help manage on-site wastewater treatment systems. So a quick explanation, if you have a sewer, you hire people to run that, right? You don't expect that each of us are going to spend a couple hours each weekend down at the plant making sure it's running. You put together an organization that's intended to manage those systems, and that's what a responsible management entity is. They're responsible for managing those systems. So as far as the county level goes, the septic utility program that I mentioned is a responsible management entity program. We're not a requirement. Our program is not a requirement. We're putting together a potential set of solutions for towns to be able to use. In effect, towns themselves would be the responsible management entity, and they can work with us to provide some of the services that an RME would need to provide. So if the town moves forward with that, we've had some conversations with some of the town staff about this already as to how Barnstable County's program can help the town of Bourne.
Thank you, Brian. Any more questions? Kevin?
I might have some of the information wrong, so anybody feel free to correct me anywhere along the line. Just a question regarding going back to the watershed permit and potential going in certain directions. It's my understanding that there are two parts of Bourne, Finney's Harbor and Squetique Harbor, that right now have been identified with the nitrogen issue. So thus the town is trying to figure out, do we go for the watershed permit or not? And if we do, what might be the plan? Are we talking sewering? Are we talking the IA systems? Combination of both. My question is that, because then it would have to go to the town meeting, I believe, a vote in terms of whether to go forward with that. If I did the math correctly, this area out here, we're really talking about maybe having that answer for this area in like 2026, whether we need to do something, in which most likely we're going to have to, but officially whether we're going to have to do something here. I guess my question is, the process that's going on now with the watershed decision and whatnot, that goes to the town. Does that obviously only speak to the two areas that have been identified now, so thus in 2026, if this area is identified, we're back to doing that process for this area? Or is it no? If the town puts in a watershed permit plan, that incorporates the town-wide, but I just don't know how it would if you don't know what you need to do in this area.
I think I can answer this. So the comprehensive wastewater management plan will cover the whole town, but it'll cover it by watershed. So, for example, we are the Pocasset Harbor watershed. If you go over the Singing Bridge, you become the Pocasset River watershed. So then there's Finney's Harbor and Squetique, Magansett, Finney's Harbor, and then of course you have those people on the other side of the canal, which we're not as worried about them as we are our side. So the comprehensive wastewater management plan will cover the entire town, just not at the same schedule or with the same plan. So one of the things that we're working on the WWAC is that the schools, the high school and the middle school, their septic system has excess capacity. So it's possible that for the Phineas Harbor area, that some homes in that area could be connected to the wastewater management, the wastewater system at the schools. We discussed that at our last meeting, but again, this is all in process. But the timing will be based on the TMDLs for our local right here area. The timing will be based on once the TMDLs are in place and approved, then we'll get on the clock, but it will be spelled out what the plan is. So, for example, if the Pocasset Harbor watershed doesn't have isn't compatible for doing sewering, then that'll be specified that we all have to do IA. And again, this is not decided. This is all what's in conversation right now. So, Kevin, to answer your question, there's not an answer today to that question. The question of how long the answer is away kind of depends on the TMDL ladies when we will be able to start at least thinking about it. And then we'll all be wanting to write letters and send emails up to DEP so we get our TMDL approved as fast as possible.
It's the middle school sewer system, you said, septic, but it's sewering. It's sewering, so there's possibility that some people may be able to connect to that, the ones that are closer, obviously, to the middle school, so.
Thanks, Kathy, for an answer to an answer. Any more questions?
Yep.
Right here.
This is a question for Brian. A lot of the properties around here are on very small lot sizes. And would it be something for them to consider having a closed system and maybe like outside showers for seasonal stuff?
Small lots are tricky, for sure. And certainly in areas where you have a lot of small lots, maybe that's where you consider limited sewers or even, connecting to sewer plants. The biggest problem when it comes to on-site systems in small lots is because you have to have a place for the wastewater ultimately to go back into the environment. And we call that a leach field. Everybody has one. We also call them soil absorption system, et
I think
cetera.
the question was a closed system.
No, yeah, I'll come up to that. Yep. So that's the problem with IA systems in general when it comes to these lots. Now, some of the solutions that are potentially available, we're looking at if these advanced technologies could use a smaller leach field. We're looking at whether you could use closed systems like that, or you could use composting and urine diversion fixtures, as opposed to having to tear up your whole yard. There's still the issue of gray water that has to be dealt with. So even if we get the urine and material, those nitrogen-producing materials out of the wastewater stream, we still have to do something with the balance of the water. So it's not generally just that simple as saying, our system is entirely closed. You could do like a tight tank, but then you're pumping it frequently, and there's a pretty expensive cost that goes with that. And the cost of disposal of tight tank materials or septic tank sludge, like when you get your tank pumped or when treatment plants do what's called wasting, when they get rid of a bunch of their sludge. That enters into this whole realm of PFAS, which I'm sure everybody's heard about at this point. I'm not even going to get into that, but that's a whole big issue in itself, which is going to push costs higher. So, I think small lots are definitely a huge challenge for on-site systems, but not insurmountable problems for sure.
Thanks, Brian. Way in the back question. Chris, who's running in the Falmouth Road Race tomorrow morning. Don't run too much, Chris. Quickly.
A couple of questions regarding cost. Who determines whether an IA system is going to be needed or whether a sewer system is feasible? And if in fact the IA system is what is required, what's the cost between an IA system and a sewer system? The sewer system seems to me as a betterment and can be spread over many years, perhaps 20 years, and that may be more cost efficient than asking a senior citizen homeowner to come up with $25,000, $30,000 or $50,000 to put in a new IA system? So that's my multi-part question. First, who determines, and then what about the cost difference between the two methods of treating this wastewater?
Okay, so I'm going to try to answer a few of those questions, and then I'm going to ask somebody who really knows what they're talking about. So the conventional wisdom, if you do some research, a sewer system is $100,000 per house, and that counts building the treatment plant, which is the biggest cost. Then you have to dig up all the roads. So depending on where you live and what your property is like, the IA system can cost $30,000 to $60,000. So one of the biggest advantages to the IA is it can be done way faster. To build a sewer system, the treatment plant alone is a long-term project. So I should have brought with me Z. Crocker, who is the Pied Piper of all this stuff on the Cape. His newsletter this week talked about the fact that for speed and cost, the IA systems are better. But that's that group's opinion. I don't know where I skipped over. So on Long Island, they've done a lot of this work ahead, and the sewer systems are averaging to cost $100,000 per house for sewer, and years down the road. So the Wastewater Advisory Committee, we're working on this project, on this problem internally to try to determine what's the best for the citizens and what's the best for the town. So, and every area is different. Like Brian said, the effluent has to go somewhere. So you need a plant that has access to the water somehow. So it's a very, very complicated, not a one-answer situation. Does anybody have anything to add to that? Corin Peterson?
Thanks, Keith. Great question, and I think it's what it ultimately always comes down to is cost. So when the town is going through its comprehensive wastewater management plan, it is looking at the different alternatives. Where is sewer feasible? Is there an existing wastewater treatment facility? Is there a smaller wastewater treatment facility like at the middle school? There's one right around the corner in Brook Harbor. Is it municipal wastewater treatment or wastewater treatment in a larger scale is by far the best way to treat for nitrogen because you have a bunch of flow that you're treating at the same time. Where that is not possible, then you're looking at different smaller wastewater neighborhood systems, and then you're looking at IA systems. So the town is going to look at all of these alternatives and which one is the most affordable for that particular area. And that is the alternative that the town is going to suggest and ultimately that the town will vote at town meeting. With respect to IA systems, traditionally municipal sewer has been able to avail themselves of the state revolving fund to finance big sewer projects. The state is now letting towns apply for SRF loans to help subsidize the cost of IA systems as well. So if a town chooses to solve the nitrogen problem and meet a TMDL with IA systems, you can get a 0% or 2% loan from the state in order to offset that cost and offset that cost over a couple of decades. So it's not I'm laying out $35,000 or $65,000 to upgrade my septic systems. It's something you can finance over the long term.
Awesome. Thanks, Corin. More questions? Yes, sir.
My wife and I live in Finney's Point, so we came over here because Finney's Harbor and the Back River watershed doesn't have a comparable organization, though we'd much like to see it. Anyways, a real-world example of an IA system. My wife and I put one in. It's called the Nitro system by a company called Clean 2.
That's the best system on the market.
Yep, that's why we got it. We work closely with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. We work closely with the Buzzards Bay Coalition to just they motivated us and gave us the data to show that it was the best performing system. But in our case, it serves two homes, a large one and a very small one. We ripped out the old septic system in both houses. One was basically an old cesspool, and replace it with one system servicing those two houses. Total cost about $120,000. So, just so you know. But in our case, it was, like I said, two houses. There was a pump station to pump it uphill from the lower house up to the leach field in the higher house. But to us, it was that or buying, we said, do we want to buy a 30-foot boat that costs $150,000, or do we want to clean up the bay? We decided to do the latter.
Fantastic. Congratulations to you and your wife. That's a great story. And when this gets on Born TV, we'll hope that a lot of people listen to how well you did that and at great expense. You also can join our group, by the way. We have membership available. You can connect to us through the...
We get your emails, so...
You're getting,
yeah,
excellent.
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
getting our emails.
Yeah.
Any more questions? So I think just to wrap up... Oh, another question. My bad.
Hi, I'm Tim. I live up over on Quail Hill Road. So, question, because you brought up a really good point. You have more than one house on a system, right? So is that a potential solution, is grouping houses so the cost can defray down? And then how, if that is the case, how many houses can go on one of these systems?
They're fighting over who's going to answer.
I tried to make that point earlier, so I'm glad you raised it again. So it's not just sewer and it's not just IA. You can do these cluster systems, and it can be any amount. It can be 2 homes, it can be 100 homes, and any size in between. So the technology is there to do it, and you get fabulous treatment. So it is possible.
So, for example, down here at the chart room, right off on Shore Road, there's a whole condo project or a house, whatever they are. I guess they're condos. Anyway, so when that project was built, the owners of Kingman put in a septic system that treats the chart room and all the other businesses down there, and it treats the new buildings up on the hill. So initially, we were told by the owner that system had capacity for 60 more homes, which was very exciting because that would come down to Cedar Point and Spruce Drive. But evidently, when we investigated, Tim Lydon, who's one of the best town employees, if anybody knows Tim, he's the town engineer. We loved him. He did a little investigating and come to find out when they built the condos and they built the system, they applied for a waiver to make it smaller than it could be. So our 60 homes went down to, I think, somewhere in the low 30s. So now the cost of connecting to it is probably not practical. But that's a kind of system that, we've been talking about. If you can get your neighbors to go along, it's a great idea because you scale everything down. More questions? Okay, so just to wrap up, we so much appreciate everybody coming. We love our speakers, and we thank them so much for coming. Dan, where did Dan go? Simone is here. Dan's here. Rachel and Corin. Brian. I didn't forget anybody yet. And then our own board of directors, who Bob and did we introduce Jerry Struzik, by the way? He's our treasurer. So if you pay your dues, Jerry keeps track of our money very soundly. So we appreciate everybody coming, and we appreciate your support. It's so important. You can by listening to what everyone has said, you can see that this is nowhere near being a final project. Everything is floating around up here somewhere. We need to bring it down. And that's, our wastewater advisory committee meetings are on Born TV. Sometimes they're on live. You can watch those, on your computer. You can watch them on cable. We're trying to get as much information out as we possibly can. That's why we like our new vehicle here, Facebook. So, Martha, did I miss anything? Jerry.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention that the dues, you know, we aren't in financial difficulty, really. I mean, we're in good shape, but they're annual. They were intended to be paid every year. And just want to thank everybody. A number of you have signed up and do it recurringly. Thank you very much. It makes all the difference. If you haven't joined, you want to join, we'd like you to. You do not have to live right in Hen Cove. You can live anywhere in Pocasset or anywhere you want. A lot of people have homes here, and we don't really live here. Another thing, I just want to throw in something that occurred to me about the oysters. A lot of people I see have dogs, and they bring their dogs in the water. If you do that, would you not let them go in if they have a flea or tick collar in? All of those are very toxic to shellfish. So just take the tick collar off while they're in the water. It'd be great. Thank you.
Awesome, Jerry. One other thing that Sue Barlow mentioned, so a few of us helped build a rain garden up at Town Hall. It was a strictly voluntary event, and I think Paula mentioned it was fun doing it. If you're up at Town Hall, if you're standing in front of the building, to the right is the rain garden that we built. It's really cool. And that's what we're intending to build here to help it filters things out of the rainwater. The town rain garden is now up on YouTube. So if you wanted to search that on YouTube, Town of Bourne Town Hall Rain Garden.